All right, I'll kick it over to Jeff for this next part.
Jeff?
Jeff, are you there?
All right.
I think...
Hey, Jeff, I think you're on mute.
Hello, and welcome to You're on Mute, CompuNet's new podcast series where we dive into the trends, technologies, and strategies shaping the future of IT. My name is Rob Husted. I'm a director at CompuNet, and I'm responsible for our Microsoft practice, and I'll be your moderator for our first episode. Today, we're tackling a topic that's top of mind for many IT and procurement leaders in the industry, Microsoft licensing. Specifically, we'll explore the differences between purchasing under the cloud solution provider model and the traditional enterprise agreement model, and why this decision means more now than ever. Joining me are two of CompuNet's Microsoft licensing specialists, Walston and Jon Brune, both of whom bring deep expertise in helping customers navigate the Microsoft licensing landscape. Together, we'll unpack the pros and cons of each model, go over real-world scenarios, and share insights that will help you make the best decision for your organization. Whether you're a CIO, an IT manager, or a procurement lead, this episode is packed with practical guidance that you won't want to miss. So let's get started and dig into the world of Microsoft licensing.
My name is Walston, and I am the managing lead for the Microsoft Business Development team here at CompuNet. We are a team of licensing specialists and strategists, and really our goal here is to help you get the maximum features and benefits at the most cost-optimized price.
My name is Jon Brune, and I am on Kai's team, and I, for better or for worse, been living in the world of Microsoft licensing for the last 15 years or so. So essentially that means staying up on all the Microsoft changes and effectively understanding the licensing contract structures as good as or better than Microsoft.
He's a Microsoft translator.
All right, Jon, perhaps we can start with you. Can you briefly explain what the CSP and the EA models are and maybe some differences between them?
So the EA has been around since roughly 2005, give or take a few years. It's been the primary license vehicle for most larger organizations, so 500 seats and above for the most part. It was designed in a time when the only license type was perpetual. It was built around paper processes, and so it's a little bit archaic. They've updated it over time, some would say with duct tape and bubble gum to accommodate online services, but it's still a little bit clunky. The CSP is the next iteration of that. Microsoft has tried a few times to find what the next EA is going to be. I think that's what they intended the MPSA to be, but the CSP is the direction Microsoft is going. And I think, as we'll talk about a little bit later, the CSP you'll see that Microsoft is actually making dramatic changes to push customers to the CSP. The major difference, just structurally, the EA was built on this kind of all or nothing model. If you were an organization and you committed to what they call an enterprise product, you're committing to that for the whole organization, making it a bit rigid. If you were a pretty vanilla organization and everybody did the same thing within the organization, great fit. But that's not the reality of most organizations. It was a little more rigid because you were committing to 3 years. There are some benefits to having that 3-year agreement, but in today's day and age, organizations are transitioning or evolving a little bit faster than the agreement. So the CSP, being that next evolution, allows for a lot more flexibility, for one. It doesn't have the mandatory minimums that the EA has. You can come in, you can buy one license, and you're in a CSP. You can have multiple different user profiles. You're not saying every worker in the organization is exactly the same. We want to license everybody exactly the same. It's recognizing that you have different people using technology to various degrees. So the menu is open, essentially. You're not making dramatic decisions for the entire organization all in one shot. The biggest piece, I would say, and in varying degrees, Microsoft continues to push the management and the responsibility onto the partner. So whereas with the EA agreement, a lot of the actual day-to-day was occurring on the back end with Microsoft operations, that's occurring with the partner today, which makes it a lot more, it's a lot quicker, but it means you have to have a better CSP partner, obviously, to have a good experience. The last piece that I'll touch on right now is I would say pushing the support onto the partner more, but the reality is Microsoft stripped away pretty much all the support out of the EA unless you're willing to pay an arm and a leg for unified support. But that first level of support is a requirement of the partner to provide the customer in this CSP model. So overall, it's a lot more flexible, but you are, depending on your partner, for better or for worse. With the CSP, it pushes the support onto the partner. So that first line of support is taken over by that partner. How that experience goes depends on the partner you use, but Microsoft has effectively stripped away that support offering that used to come as part of the EA and pushed it on to the partners to provide. That is backed by Microsoft. So, if it is a Microsoft issue, it can be escalated to Microsoft. But ultimately, a high percentage, I don't want to just throw out a number, but a high percentage of the support is going to be managed by that partner specifically. So at a very high level, those are the key differences. There's a lot of nuance to the difference in the agreements, but whether that's relevant is organization to organization. It's been around since 2015. It started out with kind of an SMB focus, not necessarily because it's sized to that type of organization, but just because it's easier for those organizations to make a change. A lot of larger organizations are just used to the EA process. And so there's a little bit of friction just getting them over that hump and into this newer renewal cycle of the CSP model. But it's been around for a while. It's evolved quite a bit over those years. To the point that, the offerings, what you can actually purchase between the two vehicles is near parity, which didn't used to be the case, but we're getting to that point where it really is parity between the EA and CSP, what they offer from a product and services perspective.
We've heard some recent changes around the enterprise agreement from Microsoft. Can you talk about some of those announcements?
Yeah, so last year, Microsoft made a major announcement to the partner community that said there was going to be huge changes coming to the enterprise agreement in 2025. Microsoft also stated that CSP was going to become a preferred license vehicle for customers that are up to 6,000 seats that were looking at working with partners for either additional support, like John said, or value-added services, whether that was design, consulting, implementation, or adoption capabilities. Microsoft also notified the partner community that they would be removing a certain subset of customers altogether from the enterprise agreement and instructed them to work with CSP partners or their Microsoft teams to procure CSP type contracts. And then finally, another major announcement was that they were instructing partners and strongly encouraging their own Microsoft internal teams to remove Azure out of the enterprise agreement, giving them more flexible contract types like CSP to give them more flexibility, cost management options, and additional capabilities.
So Kai, one thing I hear from customers that they really liked about the enterprise agreement is the 3-year model. There's some price protections that come into that. There's cost projections, it helps them with their budgets. Has CSP introduced anything to kind of catch up to that model?
Yeah, definitely. Microsoft announced that they were going to invest in the CSP program and release M365 E3, E5, and Teams Room licenses that had 3-year terms, whether they wanted to pay all up front or 3 annual payments, and give kind of the same type of structures that customers were used to in the enterprise agreements.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty big change because that was always a big selling part of the EA. You don't have to worry about us changing a license model or, the pricing midterm. It's going to be consistent for that 3-year term. And that's one of the things that the CSP has kind of been missing until now. And I'd expect those subscriptions to expand, or I guess the subscriptions that are available in that 3-year to expand considerably over time. It's debatable, whether 3-year price protection is as valuable as it has been in the past. Big sweeping changes like SQL, Proc to Core. I mean, those were pretty rough, but we haven't seen anything that dramatic in a while. Knock on wood. I mean, now we'll see a license change, but if that option is available, great. Take advantage of it, especially for those SKUs that are the core of your Microsoft spend, the E3, E5 specifically.
For sure. And even to layer onto that, if you want the flexibility of annual terms and a price change is coming, you have the option to upgrade into a 3-year term, midterm, allowing you to lock in pricing for the next 3 years ahead of any price increase.
Yeah, it's kind of like this is a little bit of a newer mechanic that is equivalent to the old EA add quantity 1 onto the contract to just insulate you from any price changes. But there are ways to do that on the CSP as well with these 3-year subscriptions, which is great.
Agreed. Another major announcement that Microsoft made was that they were effectively going to de-incentivize the enterprise agreement for their EA providing partners and effectively make them unprofitable and unsupportable up to about 15,000 seats. And this sent the EA providers scrambling to either include management fees. We've seen anywhere from $30,000 to $85,000 to help you manage your EA contracts, or to start scrambling and make CSP their primary motion, which was not one of their traditional vehicle types.
Right. And this is one of those changes where it's the partner's responsibility to deal with. It's them getting paid less from Microsoft for doing the same thing they were doing the year prior. But ultimately that's going to end up on the customer paying higher cost, whether that's to that partner in management fees just to write an EA, or reduced service from their partner managing the EA. I mean, we don't know where partners are going to fall on one side of the fence or the other, but ultimately that ends up being a problem of the customer to deal with, either higher cost or reduced support from their partner on the management of the EA.
Definitely. And to even increase that cost, Microsoft just made a major announcement this last month that they're going to standardize pricing for all customers, including from 500 to over 15,000 users, that they're going to standardize pricing against the price level A, or essentially list price or website pricing for all of their commercial and nonprofit customers. And this has had major impact and sent shockwaves through the industry.
Yeah. And to explain this a little bit further, I meant to earlier on when I was explaining just kind of the general structure of the EA, one of the key pieces of the contract, or at least how they define pricing, was defining your programmatic discounts based on your organization size. So depending on how big you are, you would get a little bit better just standard EA cost. Microsoft is getting rid of that for online services. So everybody's going to be paying essentially, or at least starting negotiations from that price level A price point. So there's something to be said for, having some price transparency. That's the way it's kind of being sold. It's great to kind of know what the starting point is. But on the other hand, it's really reducing your negotiation power for large organizations. And I think I heard somebody mention that, Microsoft is kind of moving towards this, they called it utility pricing, where they just have the standard cost, just like a power company. You just pay your power company's bill because they're providing a service. Microsoft's providing a service. You don't negotiate the cost. It is what it is. They provide that service, and then it's up to the partner to wrap, different offerings around that. And it seems like that's kind of where they're going. That analogy made a lot of sense to me. But again, ultimately, that is going to make your EA contract, whatever type of contract that is, more expensive at the end of the day, just because you're losing some of those programmatic discounts straight out of the gate.
And to layer on to that, or add to that, I just think about the writing on the wall of where they're going with the enterprise agreement. They're going to de-incentivize the partner. They're charging the customer list pricing to start with, and they're making it commitment heavy, and a commitment heavy contract with mandatory minimums and removing all the flexibility that CSP provides. And now CSP can be the most price effective option as well.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft is making these changes now.
So I think the big one, as I alluded to earlier, the contract structure was created in the world of perpetual licensing. And frankly, it was created before e-signature was a common thing. So even creating these contracts they're paper heavy. I mean, they're digitized paper now, but the process is still designed by a physical, for a physical signature. It's very clunky on the back end. I don't think a lot of organizations realize that EA partners, the amount of effort that goes into just simple management. It's very akin to what I imagine the government bureaucracy is like, where even to change, your main point of contact on an EA agreement, there's a particular form you have to fill out. And if you don't get it right, they kick it back, and it just makes it very expensive overall. So I think streamlining that process is probably, the biggest improvement, or I guess the biggest incentive for Microsoft to push this direction. It reduces that sales friction in just signing the EA contract. The other big piece, and this is nothing new. The EA used to come along, or you had these SA benefits, and it'd come with SA support incidents, and that was one of the benefits of signing an EA. I can't remember how many years ago they got rid of that, 5-8 years ago. But support is really just through Microsoft is, to some extent, you're playing support roulette. You never know how it's going to turn out. That the intent is to build this program, the CSP, which puts that first, second line of support onto the partner and effectively takes it off of Microsoft. To go along with some of the EA changes, I think they want to standardize pricing. So the CSP, in contrast to the EA, it doesn't have these volume discounts based on organization size, or I should say programmatic discounts built into it. So it really is standardizing, taking that kind of utility pricing approach and building a model that is pretty well defined, but it also lets the partners kind of design their go-to-market around it. It defines just the structure, and then it enables the CSP partners out there to take it to market how they want, what level of support they want to provide, what services they want to build around it. And then the last piece, and I don't know if this was a conscious thing by Microsoft, or something they think about in one of the benefits of moving this direction, or it just happened that way, but it does expand the number of partners available to sell this agreement. I don't know how many partners there are in the US that can sell EA contracts, traditionally called LSP partners, but it's definitely less than 20. And Microsoft hasn't expanded that for 10, 15 years. What they want to do, or I guess one of the benefits of this program, is it's allowing partners such as CompuNet, who are very engineering focused, very focused on helping customers deploy and leverage what they have made an investment in. It allows them to also sell the licensing and be much more involved in that Microsoft license and contracts life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're pretty new into Microsoft's fiscal year 26. And at the beginning of this particular year, we saw them make a pretty substantial reorganization pushed out across the globe. And so it feels like by doing this and leaning more into that CSP model, and partners like CompuNet, they're leaning into the partner community to be more of their sales force.
Yep.
And we've seen a tremendous amount of churn already in the field sales team of Microsoft. Their customers are being reassigned to different specialists, and some specialists are gone, and so potentially a reduction in sales force that they can then again
Yep.
Fall back to the partner and rely on partners like us
Yeah.
to support.
And Microsoft's always communicated that's the direction they're going. But saying they're going that direction versus these big dramatic changes like have occurred recently are two different things. So this is really going to drive organizations to lean on the partner quite a bit more. And frankly, that's by necessity because the Microsoft Direct team just is going to be smaller and smaller each year. I don't know how realistic this is, or how far Microsoft will take it, but in theory, a lot of organizations, their first line of direct Microsoft sales support is going to be some iteration of a Copilot agent, or I'm not sure what that looks like, but I think that's the general idea, is to have a lot of those sales functions automated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, they're definitely eating their own dog food when it comes to AI, for sure.
Yeah. Be interesting to see how that looks.
Yeah, I think another reason why they're leaning so much on the partners for the sales is as Microsoft capabilities expand into the different technology domains that they support, having a partner that understands all of the customers and the business initiatives and the other solutions and how those Microsoft licensing can integrate into those other solutions has become an extreme value for them to work with partners to understand the customer's ecosystem and how to either have Microsoft as a primary solution or supplement something that is foundational inside of the customer's organization.
Yeah. I mean, it touches everything. And I think this big change to call it different types of Microsoft partners. It used to be focused on, we need a large partner who is really good at transacting, because you're just buying a license, you're buying an asset, you're buying a contract, and now you're buying essentially services. And Microsoft wants that partner to be able to get that customer using those services, or else that puts sales risk on them renewing. If there's a lot of value in, something like an E5, but you need a partner who can help you deploy that and leverage it, and kind of squeeze that value out of it.
Right. For our customers that have not yet moved to CSP, what do these changes specifically mean for them?
So I think the biggest change is that enterprise agreements are no longer the best priced option. CSP has traditionally always been the most flexible option, but now it seems that going into this next year, that CSP will also be able to give the most discount, and not just across the enterprise SKUs, but all SKUs that your licensing profile supports. We also think that we would see some declining services with the enterprise agreement providers as they're scrambling to charge management fees or switch over to CSP. They've made some major changes inside of their internal teams. We're seeing a lot of sales reps with about 4 or 5 months and trying to learn large customers' environments and what does that mean. The management fee is crucial.
I'd add one thing to that. It's at this point, we're kind of speculating, what that is going to drive in the partner's response. And I think we're still a little bit early to see what partners do what. In theory, the two solutions are charge money or reduce the amount of resources you allocate towards that. Again, both impact the customer in a negative way, but it's kind of TBD where that's going to shake out in the industry. I definitely don't envy those leaders who have to make those strategic decisions at this point.
For sure. And then I also think that the flexibility of CSP, especially across commitment terms, being, whether you can provide monthly, annual, or triannual commitment terms with the billing options as well, is definitely an incentive of how CSP can support our customers' needs.
All right, guys. So with all this in mind, what are we doing at CompuNet to help customers through this transition?
So the first thing we're doing is we want to take an approach, and we do take an approach of not assuming that one is better than the other. Every organization is different. Their license mix is different. there are scenarios where the EA is by far the best option for a customer still. It's still available. In those scenarios, essentially we're flushing out your contract information and ultimately giving you the information needed to make the best decision. And usually that starts with just a basic financial analysis. We always call it the least worst place to start when looking at a new contract. And that's just taking what you have and modeling it out in the two different scenarios, CSP versus EA. Because first of all, if for whatever reason, CSP just doesn't make financial sense, and there can be situations where that is the case, we don't want to go, head first down that road. We want to make sure that, there's not a dramatic financial difference between the two. There might be one that's better than the other, but flushing that out first is step number one. And then from there, talking through the differences in the mechanics and how your organization works, because there are some differences in the agreements make absolutely no difference to an organization. Others make a big difference. So, for example, some organizations are really financially, they've gotten used to this deploy as we go, and we'll pay for it once a year at anniversary time. Doesn't mean that's the best option, but that's what they're used to, and it would be dramatic change in their internal operations to change that. The EA provides that type of structure. So there can be nuances within the organization that lead towards one contract model versus the other. So first and foremost, understanding financially, what does this look like in one world versus the other? And then talking through all the nuances of the contract to understand which makes the most sense for you. And that's largely operational mechanics of that EA or CSP lifecycle.
Yeah, I think one of the huge values that customers mention a lot of the time is traditionally in the enterprise agreement, they'd have to upgrade at the beginning of their term. And maybe they had to catch up to that upgrade by implementing those technologies as they go, which means that they paid upfront for a license that they can't fully use.
It's on the shelf.
Yeah. And so really CSP really provides pay as you go type of cost, where you only upgrade when needed, when you're ready to implement the next level of services. And we can add modules, we can add different capabilities and align that to what your implementation schedule looks like as well.
Yeah.
So you don't have any wasted technical cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's the nature of the subscription. There's good and bad with subscription pricing or the subscription model. The good is you can add when you need it. You can plan, and when you're ready to deploy and consume that, you can add it onto the agreement. The other thing I was thinking about as you were talking was over the years dealing with EAs, it sounds like something extremely simple. It sounds like something that Microsoft should be able to accommodate. But one of the biggest pain points has been with large organizations, the EA comes in one lump invoice. And there's no way around that. They take a 20,000 seat organization, they send them a cryptic looking invoice, and they say, here's your bill, which at the end of the day, the dollars are the same, but a lot of organizations have to be able to bill back to different cost centers or projects. And there's really no way to define that preemptively so that it comes through on the invoice, denoting, who spent what money. And it sounds so simple, but I feel like there's somebody within every organization whose full-time job is dissecting these invoices and figuring out who owes what. So things like that are may mean nothing to some organizations, but others that could be a deal breaker. Having the ability to break out their invoice, that could be a huge deal. So there's a lot of, they're not the big structural differences in these two agreements, but there are differences, based on your organization, how they want to do business, that can be, pretty significant, leading you down one direction or the other.
Something I've heard for many years from customers within the enterprise agreement is that they really only get a good opportunity to look at their licensing once every 3 years. It sounds like The CSP model is a lot more flexible, and you get more opportunities to look at it. Essentially, how do we ensure that they're correctly optimized, like throughout the contract, and not just once every few years?
Yeah, I think that's kind of at least what I've seen, or how partners have been managing CSPs. It makes, because the transaction is a little bit simpler, sometimes it gets treated as a transaction. Whereas with the EA model, there is this, once a year big activity where you're doing the true up exercise and the reconciliation exercise and annual payment. There was more consistent contract lifecycle management, for lack of better term. I think in the CSP, some partners see this as more of a, this is just another transaction, it's just another renewal. But where the value comes in, and where we've put a lot of time and effort, is into that continuous management of, call it the Microsoft agreement, whatever that is. And so that's continuous touch points, ensuring, whether that's quarterly, biannual, whatever makes sense for the organization. We are bringing in our engineers, licensing specialists, not just to make you aware of what changes are on the horizon, or recent changes within Microsoft, just so that, as an FYI, just so you understand where Microsoft is going, but also helping you deploy and utilize this technology that you're paying a lot of money for. So having continuous touch points, and ensuring that, just, this has always been the case, but Microsoft sells everything in a bundle. So you're always going to own more technology than you're utilizing. In a perfect world, through these touch points and through this continuous management, we're helping you deploy and maximize the value that you're getting out of that. That's not to say Microsoft's the best solution every single time, but helping you understand, where these technologies are. And I think where you look at Microsoft, call it E5 security and compliance, that's at a point where it's mature enough as some of the market leaders in that area, and a lot of organizations own pieces of that, and they're not utilizing it. Is there an opportunity to potentially displace third-party vendors, save costs there, and utilizing a cost that they're already assuming? And so part of that touch point is also something that we call a solution assessment. And that's a fancy word for something that a lot of people are doing anyways. They're looking at, what do we own in this giant Microsoft bundle, understanding what it is, where it is in its maturity level, and can we utilize this thing we're paying for over here to offset the cost for a third-party solution that we've been using for 10 years from another vendor. So really taking a close look at that, and not just on paper, as part of it, saying these two solutions do the same thing, but also bringing in this example, a security engineer to help you understand what's the level of effort in deploying it, and is it the right fit for us?
Yeah, and to expand on the solution assessment, not only are we capturing your cost per solution and to be able to compare it to your Microsoft 365 bundles, but we're also going and understanding what your organization requirements. Maybe you have a compliance goal, and based on that information, we can look at your complete solutions or your tools and see if there's any gaps. Or are you paying multiple different solutions to do the same thing? We also expand upon that and do user profiling to ensure that you don't have a standardized license across the whole environment. So a lot of organizations can leverage more cost-effective frontline licenses than maybe their power or knowledge users, and even some other times different capabilities.
That's a big one, because so many organizations that have been buying EAs, there was a point in time where Microsoft essentially wouldn't sell an EA unless it had an E5 on it. And so what that meant is they had a little more latitude to offer discounts. And what that meant was, for the customers, they got a screaming deal to license everybody in the organization with an E5. Great. That's an awesome deal for 3 years. But you come to the end of that 3-year deal, and you're paying for, an E5 for food service workers in a hospital or something like that. It just paying the full cost for an E5 for users who don't even have a dedicated device just doesn't make sense. That really doesn't change CSP versus EA. That's still the biggest lever to find cost savings or find efficiencies in the contracts. But it seems easy on paper, but the reality is you have to do a lot of digging in what that means to pull back an E5 from a user who's had that for 3 years and move them into a frontline SKU. The cost savings are significant, but you do have to do a little bit of heavy lifting to figure out, what the impact that is.
And I think that's where the value of the solution assessment comes in, is we want to ensure that we identify any impact of feature gain or loss that might impact those users. And so going through the solution assessment, not only do we provide the most cost optimized license, but we ensure that there's no disruption or massive change that might impact those users as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like we do a good job of helping customers understand the future direction of their business, 1 year at a time. The solution assessment's really valuable. Are there ways for customers to make changes throughout the year as they hire employees or maybe go through a staffing reduction? Are there tools that they can go out and see what they have and how they can reallocate licenses?
Yeah, and I would say it depends on who your CSP provider is, but the majority of them offer, if you're familiar with EA contracts, the reservation process where you can go provision, or I guess increase your accounts. If it's a product you own on the agreement, you can increase those accounts, provision them on demand. CSP gives you that same parity. It's kind of up to the partner to design what that experience is like. But for the most part, there's some type of self-service portal, so you can go in and you can provision as needed. So there's no requesting quotes, waiting for the quote, cutting a PO. You can provision when those surprise new hires show up on Monday morning. That also gives you the opportunity to touches on the billing pain points of cost centers, things like that. That's where that gives you that opportunity to define who's going to pay this, whose door am I going to come knocking on when this bill comes due. You can denote, who needed that subscription or who is on the hook for paying for it. So you can slice and dice a little bit more. One other thing that we didn't really touch on is we talk about increased flexibility. A lot of times for your core organization, say about 500 users, that's going to be pretty static. You probably do a 1 year commit at a time, because that's going to give you the best price, making that annual commit. There's also month-to-month SKUs that you can use that do cost a little bit more, but it gives you that flexibility to say, we have a internship program and we have 50 people come in during the summer for 3 months.
Yeah. Or seasonal workers.
Yeah, or seasonal workers, holiday workers for retail. There's a million different scenarios where, the EA was rigid. You can add as you need it, but you can only make reductions at anniversary. So if your anniversary just happened to hit at the right time, great, that's awesome. But for most customers, that wasn't the case. So with CSP, you can add these month-to-month SKUs, which, really just allows you more flexibility and, it's accommodations for the non-vanilla organization, which is every organization these days.
Yeah, and another additional value point that that month-to-month flexibility gives you is, in case you also wanted to test or maybe prove, evaluate what a Microsoft solution might look against what your current solution that you have. You can do short-term tests, the most cost-effective proof of concept, to see what the capabilities are. We a lot of times see also maybe there's a threat to the environment, and for a short term, your customer might want to increase their security profile using Microsoft products, and then decide after a month or two, does that go into their long-term strategy? But at least they can, for a short term, protect their environment with additional capabilities.
Yeah. So one of the things that we hadn't really got into in detail is this shift in support. So obviously that puts a lot of responsibility on the partner, the CSP partner, to provide that first level of support. The reality is your experience will vary depending on who your partner is. Sometimes, in the world of Microsoft, you're almost always going to be a small fish in this big pond. The reality is with certain partners, maybe you have a little more hands-on approach. Maybe it's a support-focused organization, engineering-focused organization, where that support level is increased incredibly. Or maybe it's just a volume organization, and you're a small fish in a big pond, and then another small fish in another bigger pond. So the experience is variable, I would say. And again, I only have visibility, or I guess experience, working with a couple organizations, but that's some of the feedback I've heard. The reality is Microsoft had severed the support unless you're, a Fortune 500 size organization. Beyond just the base support you get as part of being a CSP customer, there are a lot of organizations who have traditionally been on what's called a unified support agreement, which a lot of organizations are reliant on that. They have been using it for years. They use enough of the proactive services that they get the value out of it to justify the costs. But in this move to CSP, what CompuNet has done and what a lot of organizations have done have expanded their support offering to be closer to parity of what the Unified Support Agreement offers. So that means having a technical account manager, having people who are in charge of that support within the partner organization for that customer to have kind of a more hands-on experience, weekly or monthly cadences to follow up on support cases, and, pulling in resources for proactive services as needed. So as unified support gets more and more expensive, a lot of partners are kind of coming in and filling that gap by providing their own unified option. I don't want to say it's a replacement necessarily, but it's an alternative to unified support.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you saying is there's a lot of layers to support. So as customers move more toward a partner-driven model for licensing and away from that more traditional direct model, they really need a partner that can help them in all aspects of the journey, right? So when you typically think of unified support, that's definitely a heavy break fix model. Something that I bought that we deployed isn't working, and I need to open up a ticket and I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And so the CSP partner needs to solve for that in that unified like replacement. But there's also just basic licensing questions. There's that, how does this work? Where do I go next?
Mm-hmm.
And so those aren't often wrapped up into an actual defined support agreement for break fix. So you need to be working with a partner you trust that you can call and talk to a person and say, I think we need to make a quick change on our licensing. How would you recommend we do this? We've got this business change coming up. It's going to be transformational for us. Can we get into a session and talk through some of these things? And so you just really need a mature set of resources that the customer can call and talk to licensing specialists, talk to adoption specialists, customer success managers, engineers. All that comes way before just the ultimate, now my email's not working and I need help, right?
Support is such a broad term, or what that actually means. Sometimes that's where did the button go in my admin portal? It's not there anymore, but that's still support.
Right. All right. So I'm a customer. I'm ready to move to CSP, and I'm calling CompuNet. What does that whole process look like?
Well, so first of all, I'd say let's understand if CSP is right. All the marketing out there is making it seem like CSP is. Microsoft's obviously going that direction. Eventually, it may be your only option. Right now, it's not. So we take the approach that we don't want to make any assumptions on that one is better than the other. Technically, the EA still exists. It's still an option for you. So we want to understand. Basically, we want to learn about your organization. Ultimately, if we boil it down, we're uncovering all the information that's going to help you make an informed decision, and that's financial, talking through the mechanics of the EA versus CSP, make sure that aligns with your internal operations. Are there going to be any gaps? Like we mentioned earlier, that the CSP is, if you rewind even 5 years back, the CSP offering is incredibly more mature. But back then, there were a lot of gaps relative, if you were coming from an EA, that the CSP just didn't offer, that, could be step-up SKUs or, some of these nuanced things that, aren't broadly impactful to most customers, but may be to your organization. And there still are a few gaps there in what CSP offers versus the EA. So ultimately, we want to understand what is the impact should you go CSP versus staying on the EA, and what is the financial impact of both. Are they parity? Is one dramatically better than the other? And just talk through what that looks like. Talk and again, we're not here to tell you which direction to go. We're here to help you make that decision on what's best for your organization.
Are there technical migrations involved? Like if I move my licensing from an EA vehicle to a CSP vehicle, do I need to do tenant migrations? Do I need to get engineering involved?
No, and that's a good question. Sometimes it doesn't get mentioned because the answer is no. But that is a big consideration if you're moving to this new license model. Does that mean I have to migrate to a different tenant, or am I gonna have an hour of downtime while this something happens on the back end? But no, your experience in the 365 admin portal is exactly the same. Services are provisioned to the same place. There's no different portal you need to learn. And it's really seamless. It's really just changing on the back end how billing comes through. Essentially, services get provisioned. You assign them just the same. It's just that your invoice eventually comes from a partner as opposed to from Microsoft direct.
Yeah, the 365 admin portal doesn't care what is the license vehicle. It just sees an M365 E3 or an E5 or a license type, and depends on what the contract vehicle that supports it. So if it's CSP, EA, any other Microsoft Direct offering, there is no need to reassign users or change your profiles if you go ahead and shift contracts.
So you mentioned M365 quite a bit. Are there special considerations for Azure?
There's definitely with Microsoft's primary motion to move Azure off of enterprise agreements, we do want to be mindful that there are certain resources, mostly legacy, maybe a little archaic resources that don't transfer well. We do have tools that we can use to help that move, but most of the time our cloud engineers can give you some ideas if there is a troubled resource or something that might need a little assistance to move over. That's something that we can provide, consult with you, and ensure that we plan for that in the move to CSP.
Yeah, the level of effort, it can be zero or near zero, or it can be quite a bit. And I think, again, this is just me speculating, but I think that's kind of by design. Microsoft doesn't want, if people are spending in Azure, they don't want them shifting things around and making all sorts of changes. They just kind of want that snowball to keep rolling and keep accruing that monthly revenue.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite things about working for CompuNet is the deep bench of resources that we have to support, right? So we can have really extensive licensing conversations and go through a solution assessment with our customers, help them align their technical goals and their business goals to their licensing strategy. But also when it does come a time where we have to do a technical migration, or at the same time they're moving their licensing, they want to do a big licensing uplift, we can bring in the right engineering resources at the same time to be part of the conversation to help map that roadmap out for them.
Right. Yeah. And this is not that new. It's been kind of the reality of Microsoft conversations for a while, but it's never just a licensing conversation or never just a technology deployment conversation, as I'm thinking about it now, as I'm talking, I mean, most of our conversations include a licensed specialist and an engineer in the same conversation because they're both intertwined.
Well, Kai, John, thank you so much for your time today. This has been really, really insightful. Clearly, there's a tremendous amount to consider as customers out there are coming up for a renewal. And so with all these considerations, best recommendation is to reach out to your partner. If you're working directly with Microsoft, talk with them, get ahead of this so that you can have a plan in place and you're ready for renewal and you can move on without any hiccups.